My name is Dan from Mastering Mixing, and today I want to show you how to take a sound like this and turn it into something cool like this. Okay, so right off the bat, I want to show you just a stock snare that I was working with. Okay, so not bad, but really not that exciting. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to create a double of it, except on the double, we're going to pitch it down. And basically we're going to add the effects to the pitch down octave of the snare. So the dry pitched octave is going to sound like this. And both of them together is going to sound like this. So right off the bat, you might notice that both of these played together makes a fatter snare drum sound, which is pretty obvious. You have an octave playing below, right? But that's not really the beauty of the technique that I want to show you. So I'm going to show you the effects here. The first thing we're going to do is just add a basic, I'm using a Lexicon Hall reverb, which is a great reverb if you don't have it. But you can use any reverb. You can use Deverb or Fruity Loops reverb, whatever. And the result we're going to get is something like this. Okay, so we're making a little bit of progress. But if you follow my Instagram account, which you should, you know I like to get kind of crazy with my chains and do some pretty cool stuff. So the first thing we can do, you can do this with really any effect, and you probably should do it with just about every effect, is just to add an EQ on it. So the EQ is not doing anything crazy, just a standard low cut and a high shelf, but I'm also adding about 2 dB of gain at 5700 just to give the reverb a little bit of that extra sparkle and a little bit of that hit on the snare that I'm going for. So let's take a quick listen to what it sounds like with the filter on. Okay, so it's a little bit cleaner, has a little bit more top end. That's great. But one of the things that I love to do on a sound like this where I really want it to cut through the whole mix is to add a little bit of distortion before the reverb. So I'm using Decapitator here because I like it and it sounds really cool. And just listen to what this thing does. Before and after. Okay, so way brighter. It's got way more high harmonics up there. That's great. Just quick look at my settings on Decapitator. I set the drive up a ton. I put the punish on, and it's got a really bright tone. And the mix knob, here's the key with distortion. You can drive distortion plugins pretty heavily. Just turn the mix knob down. Otherwise, you're going to get, if you don't turn the mix knob down, it's just going to sound distorted as hell, and it's not going to be very good. But if you turn the mix knob down, you can kind of get away with this. And you can do this with any distortion plugin. It doesn't have to be a fancy Sound Toys distortion emulator. It can be Sansamp or whatever, Fruity Loops, basic distortion. It doesn't really matter. But when we do these kind of things with distortion and reverb, we need to make sure that we keep ourselves in check. So what I really like to do when using distortion, especially distortion with reverb, is to compress the signal before it hits the distortion. Otherwise, it's going to peak in weird places. And you might want that, but most of the time you're going to want a pretty steady reverb, pretty steady signal. So let's take a look at what compression does here. Again, here it is before the compression. And here it is after. So if you're paying close attention, which you should be, you'll notice that it got a little bit fatter. Didn't really get louder, just got fatter. So let's take a look at the settings that we used. On this kind of thing, I really like to use a pretty low ratio, like 1.5 to 3. And I usually keep the release pretty fast, and then the attack I'll kind of play with. You can always tweak these settings. I'm not actually playing this in the mix. In the mix, I probably have slightly different settings. So always feel free to experiment. And on this, I'm probably getting around 12 to 18 dB of compression. You can really go in with this as long as you use a low ratio. All right, so you might stop here. You might say, this snare sounds perfect for my mix. I'm done. I don't want to touch it anymore. I don't want to filter anything out. But if you're experimental and you like to create things like me, you might want to add in something cool. So I really like to use a Transient Designer. If you guys don't have Transient Designers, you should invest in one. They are awesome. Let's take a listen to what it does, and then I'll go into the settings I used and how you can use it. Here it is without it. And here it is with it. Okay, so not a crazy massive change. We're at the point where we really just want to fine tune things and see if we can come up with something cool. So for this, if you've never really played with transient designers, you're not familiar with what a transient is, you might not have really heard that much different. But basically what it does is it brightens it up a little bit by having that initial attack be a little bit stronger. So on this, I literally jacked up the attack all the way it could possibly be, and then I cut all of the sustain on it. So it's just another tool for you to have in your mixing toolbox. And this is just one of many, many uses for a transient designer, by the way, but I'll show you all those later in other future videos to come. The last thing I want to look at in this chain is I want to add a gate. So the tail of that reverb, especially if we were to listen in a mix, it might be a little bit too long. Like it might interfere with a hat that's coming in later, or it just might be dragging on too long. You just might not want it to be that big. So what we can do is use any old gate. I'm using the FabFilter Pro G, which is awesome. And I actually have it keyed in. So the key input is on the Verb snare, the pitch down snare where the effect is coming from. So it lets you have that bigness of the initial snare hit and that initial like, oh, we're in a reverb, huge snare thing, which is great. Huge snare thing. But the gate is just going to prevent it from being too long and too muddy and grossing up your mix. I'm using all kinds of new vocabulary words. All right, so let's listen to it without the gate and then with the gate. So you can hear that the decay of the reverb gets changed a little bit. You guys can always tweak these settings. These are not set in stone, obviously. You can tweak the threshold to really cut off the end of that, and you can have it cut off pretty abruptly. I just really wanted to tweak the decay of it a little bit. I could do a whole nother video on gated reverbs. If you do want to see that, let me know down in the comments, and I will whip something cool up for you guys. But until then, let's look at what we started with and what we ended with. So we started with this dinky little piece of junk, and then we turned it into this beast of a sound. Alright, not too bad. So if you guys like this video, be sure to drop a like on the actual video itself so other people can see it. And if you have any friends that have terrible snare sounds and they need some help, be sure to send them this video. And if you want to see more cool videos, please subscribe to the channel. I'm going to be posting tons of videos. If you see my Instagram account, you know I post tons of tips, but it can be kind of tough to explain this kind of thing in 200 words in a little Instagram post. So be sure to follow me on all social media at Mastering Mixing. And until then, I will catch you guys later. Keep making some cool mixes. Peace.